Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you guys are. Hello. Sorry, a little bit came in a little bit late because my microphone just fell off just now, so I had to take some time to put it back up. All good now, all good now. I just want to let you guys know I bought like a really fucking cheap microphone back in like 2021 or something. It's been 5 years, guys, 5 years. It's doing like I'm sure I could get better sound quality, but you know what? I think this is very good. The fact that it's such a cheap microphone, it's probably at $10 or something, and it lasted this long. Touch wood, touch wood, touch wood, touch wood. And that yeah, it's the sound quality is still very good. There were a few times when it sounds a bit more muffled than this, mostly because my settings on OBS is not great. But yeah, let me see. Hello. Check, check. Is everything too loud? Is my background sound too loud? Can we put it down a little bit, I guess? Might be better. Check, check. Check, check, check. Check. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Alright, I think this should be fine. I have to place the microphone in front of my face. Okay. Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Check, check. Okay, I think this is good enough. Okay, let's start. Yeah, we have some free time today, so I can finally do some reading. And we can finally finish up Natsume Sōseki's それから and then we'll see what we'll read after that. Yeah, I have a few days off from work. It's pretty nice. Spent the whole day sleeping yesterday, which was great, but also felt quite guilty because felt like I wasted my whole day. But it's fine. I don't get to sleep in that much lately. But yeah, all's good. Anyways, guys. Alright, we have 3 chapters to go. For this book. And we had a pretty good confession chapter in chapter 14 the last time we came in here. And I think it's gonna be. I'm very very curious what's gonna happen next, because um I was like it. The book kind of reminds me of sorry, my train of thought just went away. Anyways, yes. It reminds me a lot of like I feel like I'm reading a prequel to The Gate actually. I don't know how much you guys remember about The Gate, but yeah, I feel like I was reading The Gate when I'm reading this book. I don't know if there's some kind of like an official like trilogy or something with like um with this book, with like these few books, and I'm like just thinking it's like, wow, did Natsume Sōseki write this like some kind of a prequel to The Gate? Actually, I don't even know which book came first. Is Sorekara came first or The Gate came first? So I've wanted to like go do some research on the like is this the prequel to The Gate? Um, but I also didn't want to spoil myself of the ending because cause after I finished reading chapter 14, I was like, hey, what the fuck? I kind of want to know, what like I I kind of want to know what happens next, and I have zero clue what's going to happen next. And it's such a good feeling when you're reading a book and it is kind of unpredictable that you're like, oh shit, is like I know Natsume Soseki's books are all very bleak. There's some, it always doesn't. I'm not saying that they are all unhappy ending or something like that, but there's always like this feeling of bleakness and yearning, and like kind of like a like ending with like some kind of hope. But I sincerely don't know how this book is gonna end, and I didn't want to go do some research, like and check if this is gonna be is this really the prequel to The Gate, because I was so scared that I will go look for something and then I just accidentally see the ending of Sore Kara, and I'll be disappointed because I haven't finished reading the book yet. So, my point is, I'm gonna finish reading this book today, and I'm gonna do some googling. Anyways, hope you guys are enjoying the book as much as I am. It's like any other Natsume Soseki's books. Really is slow. It's very day to day. Very, you know, yeah. It's like slice of life stuff. Not a lot of people like these kind of books. Most people like really like adventures and like exciting books. I like this type of books because they remind me of the real life. I know some people read to escape real life, but I don't know. I just really like this kind of book which portrays reality very, 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 very accurately, because I feel like writing reality is so difficult. It's so easy to stray into some wondrous, plot point. Like it's kind of difficult to write mundane day-to-day stuff. And Natsume Soseki is so good at describing feelings, describing sceneries, describing this landscape of emotions. That it's one of the biggest reasons why I really love Natsume Soseki, but could also be a lot of people's reason not to like him because it's so boring for some people. Not for me. I love them. Anyways, let's not dilly dally anymore. Let's read. We are okay. Okay, let's read. Let's finish it. Finish the 3 chapters up, and then we'll see what we'll do. Okay, I'll do more readings next week or something. Start a new book or something. We'll see. Okay. I got some requests for me to read Murasaki Shikibu's journals. I do have it. But it's going to be like a one stream read because it's a quite short book. But yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah, and yeah, let's start. Basically, yeah, it's gotta stop with this yapping. Alright, guys, today we are going to finish Natsume Soseki's Sore Kara, and then And we are going to start in about 10 seconds. Today we are reading Natsume Sōseki, それから Chapter 15. Chapter 15. After he had seen Michio and said to her the things that had to be said, Daisuke found it considerably easier to experience something resembling peace of mind, at least as compared with before. But this was only as he had expected and was in no way particularly surprising result. The day after their meeting, he rose with the conviction of a man who had decisively cast the die he had long held in his hand. He recognized that since the previous day, he had become obligated to bear a certain responsibility for his and Michio's fate. Moreover, it was a responsibility that he himself had taken the initiative to assume. Consequently, he could not find the burden painful. He even felt that pushed by its weight, his feet moved forward more naturally. Bearing the slice of fate that he had carved out for himself on his head, he prepared to do the final battle with his father. Behind his father stood his brother and his sister-in-law. After he had fought them, there would be Hiraoka. Even if he made his way through them, there would still be all of society. There would be that machine-like society that would not for one moment make allowances for individual freedoms and private circumstances. That society now appeared to Daisuke as a total darkness. He resolved to fight everything. He was surprised at his own bravery and daring. Until this day, he had viewed himself as a perfect gentleman, disliking passion, incapable of risk, avoiding games of chance, cautious, peaceful. Morally speaking, he had never committed a cowardly act in any significant sense, but he still found it difficult to remove from his mind the impression that he was faint-hearted. He subscribed to a certain popular foreign magazine. In one number he had come across an article entitled Mountain Accidents and had been alarmed. The article recounted the injuries and the mishaps that befell those adventurers who crawled up high mountains. There was a story about a climber lost in an avalanche whose bones appeared 40 years later on the tip of a glacier. Another described the plight of 4 adventurers who, about to pass a flat, vertical rock that stood halfway up the side of a peak and piled one on top of the other like a monkey. But just as the highest was about to reach for the tip of the rock, it had crumbled, the rope had broken, and the 3, doubled one upon the other, had plunged headlong past the 4th into the distance. In the midst of these accounts were inserted several illustrations of human beings glued like bats to mountainside as sheer as a brick wall. Daisuke, imagining the white sky and distant valleys that lay beyond the white space beside the precipitous cliffs, could not help re-experiencing the dizziness brought on by the terror. He discovered that in the world of morality he stood on the same ground as those climbers. But now that he stood there himself, he had not the slightest intention of recoiling. It would have been infinitely more painful for him to recoil and gain a reprieve. He wanted to see his father and talk to him as soon as possible. Fearing that he might be engaged and unable to see him, the day after Michio came, he called to ask for a convenient time. He was told that his father was out. When he called again the next day, he was refused on the grounds of a prior arrangement. The next time, he was told that there was no need for him to come until such time as he should be called. Daisuke waited as he ordered. In the meantime, there was not a single letter from either his sister-in-law or his brother. At first, Daisuke speculated that the family had plotted to allow him as much time as possible to reflect and reconsider, so he remained nonchalant. He took his meals heartily. At night, he dreamt in relative peace. Once or twice in the intervals of clear sky, he took Kadono for a walk. Still, there was neither a message nor a letter from home. Daisuke became uneasy, thinking that the respite granted him midway up the precipice had lasted too long. In the end, he made up his mind to go to Aoyama himself. His brother was out as usual. His sister-in-law gave him a pitying look when she saw him, but she would say nothing about the matter at hand. When he heard what had brought him, she said she would go to the back and ask father if it was convenient for him to see Daisuke. Umeko's manner suggested that she was protecting Daisuke from his father's wrath. It could also have been interpreted as an attempt to estrange him. Daisuke waited, agonizing over which it might be. As he waited, he repeated over and over to himself that no matter what happened, he was prepared for it. It was some time after Umeko emerged from the back. She looked at Daisuke and said again with pity that it was not convenient for father to see him that day. Daisuke had no choice but to ask when he should come again. His former spirit had faded and the query sounded dejected. Umeko, in a tone that suggested that his manner had aroused her sympathy, promised to take it upon herself to let him know of a suitable time within 2 or 3 days, and urged him to go home for the day. As Daisuke stepped from the inner entrance, Umeko, who had deliberately come to see him off, warned, "You would really better think it over this time." Daisuke went out the gate without even answering. On his way home, he felt terribly annoyed. As he walked, the feeling mounted in him that the peace he had discovered since his meeting with Michio had been to some extent destroyed by his father and sister-in-law's behavior. He would have told his father everything just as he felt it. His father would have expressed his thought without reserve, and whatever the outcome, Daisuke would have accepted it manfully. This was what Daisuke had anticipated. His father's tactics were unpleasant beyond expectation, and insofar as they reflected his father's character, Daisuke found them even more disagreeable. On the way, Daisuke tried to recall why he had gone to the trouble of hastening the interview with his father. Since it was no more than an effort to respond to his father's demands in the first place, it should have been advantageous to his father, who was waiting for his answer. If his father was going to avoid him in this studied fashion and postpone their meeting, then it could only result in delaying a solution to his own problems. As far as Daisuke was concerned, he had already taken care of the important aspect relating to his own future. He decided that until his father specified a time and summoned him, he would do nothing more about his family. Daisuke came home. Only a faintly dark shadow of annoyance with his father lingered in him, but this shadow was such that it was sure to become more somber in the near future. Other than that, he perceived the two currents of fate lying before him. One pointed to the direction in which he and Michio would be swept along. The other was a threatening force that seemed determined to swallow both him and Hiraoka. Since his meeting with Michio the other day, he had done nothing about Hiraoka. Even if he were to see Michio now, and he had no intention of allowing a long period of time to elapse without seeing her again, he was unprepared to take a definite course of action and move beyond their present situation. On this point, Daisuke himself had simply not designed a lucid plan. As for the future that was sure to sweep him along with Hiraoka, all that he had was a readiness to face anything at any time. Of course, he intended to wait for an opportune moment to seize the initiative and appeal to Hiraoka, but he had prepared nothing concrete. The one thing he had promised himself that he would not fail to do under any circumstances was to disclose everything to Hiraoka. Hence, the current fate that would unite him with Hiraoka was a black and fearful thing. One of his worries was the problem of how he should save Michio from this terrifying storm. Last of all, Daisuke had not ordered his thoughts towards the society that surrounded him with a mass of human beings. In point of fact, society possessed the right to sanction him, but he believed the right to his deeds and his motives issued strictly from his own natural endowments and from nothing else. He intended to proceed on the assumption that on this point there were no grounds for debate between himself and society. From his position at the center of his small world, Daisuke regarded the situation thus, and having surveyed once again its constituent relationship and their hierarchy, he said, "This should do," and left the house. He walked 1 or 2 blocks to his customary rickshaw landing, where he selected a particularly handsome and speedy-looking vehicle and leaped in. With no destination in mind, he named an arbitrary section of the town and rode around and round for about 2 hours before going home. The next day, once again in his study, he stood at the center of his world, just as he had the day before, and looked everywhere, to his left, to his right, in front and behind, then said, "Very well," and went out, this time to roam wherever his feet carried him, and again without a goal, and then came back. He repeated the same procedure on the 3rd day, but as soon as he stepped out, he crossed the Edogawa River and went to Michio's place. "Why haven't you come since?" she asked, quite as if nothing had taken place between them. Daisuke was rather taken aback by her utter composure. Michio deliberately took the cushion from Hiraoka's desk and thrust it toward Daisuke. "Why are you so restless?" she asked, and made him sit on it. As they talked for an hour or thereabouts, Daisuke's head gradually became calm. It occurred to him that rather than to ride aimlessly in a rickshaw, he should have come sooner, even if for only 30 minutes. On his way out, Daisuke said, "I'll come again. It'll be all right, don't worry," as if to reassure Michio. Michio only smiled. That evening, there was at last a message from his father. When it came, Daisuke was dining with the old woman in attendance. He put his bowl down to take the letter from Kadono and read the message that he was to come by a certain time on the following day. "Sounds like a government office, doesn't it?" he said, and showed the postcard to Kadono. "Is it from your home in Aoyama?" asked Kadono, looking at it politely. Not having anything to say, he turned it over and resorted to flattery, saying, "Well, one thing's for sure, you have to admit those old people have a good hand," and went out. The old woman had been chattering about almanacs. The older brother of the sign of water, and the younger brother of gold, the harvest festival, the sportless day, and the nail trimming day, the building day. It was all terribly bothersome. Daisuke, of course, was only giving half an ear to what she said. She asked again for a job for Kadono. Even if it was only for 25 yen, couldn't he be placed somewhere? Daisuke paid so little attention that he hardly knew how he answered to her. But to himself, he thought that it was no time to worry about Kadono. He himself was in danger. Just as he finished his meal, Terao came from Hongo. Daisuke looked at Kadono's face and thought for a while. "Shall I say no?" asked Kadono carelessly. Since the other day, Daisuke had missed an appointment or two, which was rare for him. When he thought he could get away with it, he had also refused to receive visitors, which had happened about twice. Daisuke decided to go ahead and see Terao. As usual, Terao was desperately trying to get something. Seeing this, Daisuke did not feel like leveling his usual barrage of sarcasm at him. Whether it was translation or adaptation, Terao was determined to struggle through as long as he was alive. And in this respect, He was more a faithful child of society than Daisuke was. If he were to stumble and find himself in Terao's position, what kind of work would he be able to withstand? When he thought about this, Daisuke felt sorry for himself. Resigned as he was to not so distant, almost certain prospect of falling even harder than Terao, Daisuke could not look upon him with contempt. Terao had managed to finish the translation by the end of the month, but the publisher had begun talking about unfavorable circumstances and said that he would have to postpone publication until the fall. Unable to convert his labors directly into cash, Terao had turned to Daisuke as a last resort. Had he agreed to work without a written contract? That did not seem to be quite the case. But he would not say that the bookseller was disregarded and had disregarded an agreement between them. In other words, Terao was vague. The only sure thing seemed to be that he was in difficulty. But Terao, accustomed as he was to such slips, did not seem to be reproaching anyone for breach of faith. Outrageous, unpardonable, he might say, but that was only with his lips, and his real concern seems to be centered on rice and meat. Daisuke felt sorry for him and gave him something to help with his immediate finances. Terao thanked him and went home. Before he left, he confessed that he had actually received a small advance from the publisher, but he had used it up long ago. After Terao left, Daisuke thought that this man too showed a certain strength of character. It was not something one could achieve just by living comfortably from day to day as he himself did. Maybe the literary circle of the days were languishing under such deplorable conditions that they had seen a need for such a type and given birth to him naturally. Daisuke thought as he stared into space. That night, the future weighed heavily on him. He wondered if, should his father withdraw his material support, he would have the resolve to become a second Terao. If he couldn't pick up a brush and at least imitate him, it was clear that he would starve. If he didn't pick up his brush, what could he do? From time to time he opened his eyes and gazed at the lamp placed outside the mosquito netting. In the middle of the night he struck a match and had a cigarette. He tossed and turned. The night was not so hot as to hinder sleep. The rain began to fall noisily again. Daisuke thought that he might fall asleep to the sound of the rain, but he also woke up from it time to time. The night passed in a fitful alternation of sleep and wakefulness. Daisuke left at the appointed time. He got into the streetcar with his rain clogs and umbrella, but with all the windows on the side closed and a large number of people hanging from the leather straps, his stomach soon became queasy and his head heavy. Thinking that he was probably suffering from the effects of sleeplessness, he struggled to reach and open the window directly behind him. The rain beat in mercilessly on his collar and hat. 2 or 3 minutes later, he noticed the annoyed looks on the faces of his neighbors and pushed the glass in its place again. On the outer surface of the glass, crushed raindrops clustered together and warped the view of the street. Daisuke twisted his neck to look outside and rubbed his eyes several times. But no matter how he rubbed, he did not get the impression that the world had changed at all. This was particularly true when he looked at an angle through the glass into the distance. Once he changed streetcars in Benkebashi, the crowds thinned and the rain became light. Now he could comfortably turn his head towards the moistened world. But his father's ill-humored face with its variety of expressions assaulted his brain. He even heard the echo of an imaginary conversation in his ears. As usual, before he passed from the entranceway to the inner quarters, he stopped to see his sister-in-law. "Isn't this disagreeable weather that we have been having?" she said, and hospitably poured him tea herself. Daisuke did not feel like drinking it. "Father should be waiting, so I think I'll go see him," he said, started to rise. His sister-in-law looked uneasy and said, Dai-san, if it's at all possible, don't make an old man worry. Father doesn't have that much time left him. It was the first time Daisuke had heard such gloomy words fall from Umeko's lips. He felt as if he had suddenly fallen into a dark pit. His father sat with a tobacco tray before him, his head bowed. Even when he heard Daisuke's footsteps, he did not lift his head. Daisuke went before him and bowed politely. Where he had expected a stern scrutiny, Daisuke was surprised to find that his father's manner was mild, even solicitous. It must have been troublesome coming in the rain. Then he noticed for the first time that his father's face had hollowed markedly. Since it had been on the fleshy side to begin with, the change was all the more apparent to Daisuke. Almost involuntarily he asked, Is something the matter? For a moment, a paternal expression stirred on his father's face, but he did not seem to take Daisuke's concern particularly seriously. After a few exchanges, however, he said, I've gotten quite old too. His tone was so altered that Daisuke had growing cause to take his sister-in-law's words seriously. His father intimated that he wished to retire from the business world soon on the grounds of failing health. However, he proceeded to explain carefully the tide had turned since the commercial expansion following the Russo-Japanese War, and with the enterprise under his control in such state of decline, he would inevitably be charged with irresponsibility if he were to retreat before they had cleared this impasse. He therefore had no choice but to stay on for some time longer. Daisuke found his father's words most reasonable. His father expounded on the dangers, difficulties, and pressures of ordinary businesses, and the fearful anguish and tension attendant upon their managers. In conclusion, he observed that whereas the great provincial landowners seemed more modest by comparison, they actually rested on far more solid foundation than men like himself. With this comparison on his basis, he endeavored once more to bring about the realization of the proposed match. It would be most useful to have at least one relation like that, and in this situation, it is almost imperative, don't you think? He said. For his father, this was rather too bold a proposal of a marriage of convenience, but Daisuke had never overrated him so highly as to be surprised by it. Indeed, he found it rather pleasant that for their last meeting, his father had finally shed his old mask. Daisuke knew that he himself was not above making such marriage without a moment's hesitation. Beyond this, he felt a sympathy for his father such as he had never experienced before. His face, his voice, his efforts to persuade Daisuke, everything about him attested to the misery of old age. Daisuke could not interpret this as a part of his father's stratagems. He wanted to say that he did not care what happened to him. He would like his father to decide as suited him best. But now, with that last meeting with Michio behind him, Daisuke was not in a position to engage in such a spontaneous act of filial piety as would satisfy his father's will. He had always been a middle-of-the-road sort. He had never submitted word for word to anyone's command, but neither had he passionately rebelled against anyone's advice. Depending upon the interpretation, this was the posture of a schemer, or the strategy of a born vacillator. If he himself had been confronted with either of these charges, he would not have avoided wondering if they might not be true. But in large part, this was to be attributed neither to artifice nor to vacillation, but rather to the flexibility of his vision, which allowed him to look in both directions at once. To this day, it was precisely this capacity that had always dampened his determination to advance single-mindedly toward a particular goal. It was not usual for him to stand paralyzed in the midst of a situation. His posture of upholding the status quo was not the result of poverty of thought, but the product of lucid judgment. But he had never understood this truth himself until he acted upon his beliefs with inviolable courage. The situation with Michio was precisely a case in point. He had opened his heart to Michio, and it did not occur to him to wipe the slate clean before his father. At the same time, he was sincerely sorry for his father. It was obvious that course of action the usual Daisuke would have adopted under these circumstances. Without going through the inconvenience of renouncing his relationship with Michio, he would have acceded to the marriage in order to satisfy his father. Thus, he could not have balanced both parties. It was easy to stand in the middle, not adhering to either side, advancing without being consumed. However, he was now a man of different inclination from the usual Daisuke. The hour was past for him to shake hands with other human beings, with half his body standing beyond the pale of society. He took his responsibility towards Michio that deeply and that seriously. His conviction stemmed in part from an assessment of his mind, in part of longings of his heart. The two overwhelmed him in an enormous wave. Thus he stood before his father, a man reborn. Like the usual Daisuke, he waited, trying to say as little as possible from his father's viewpoint. There was nothing different about him from the usual Daisuke. It was Daisuke who had startled by the change in his father. He had guessed that the real reason he had been refused a meeting from these past few days was that his father, fearing Daisuke would disobey him, had deliberately postponed it. Daisuke had resigned himself to being met with a grim face. He had thought that he might even be scolded bitterly. This rather suited Daisuke's purposes. In fact, 1/3 of him had secretly prepared to make psychological use of the reaction of his father's outburst would provoke in him, enabling him to refuse outright. Daisuke was discomfited to discover the contrary to his expectations. His father's manner, his choice of words, his principal objective all tended to blunt his resolve, but Daisuke had come armed with a resolve that could overcome even this discomfiture. At last he said, "Everything that you say is most reasonable, but since I do not have the courage to consent to marriage, I have no choice but to refuse this match." All his father did was to stare at his face. Presently, he tossed his pipe onto the floor mat and said, "Do you need courage?" Daisuke stared at his knees and was silent. His father asked again, The woman doesn't suit you?" Daisuke still did not answer. He had never confided so much as a quarter of his thoughts to his father. It was because of this that he had been able to maintain peaceful relations with him for a short while. But from the start, he had never intended to hide the matter with Michio. He disliked the cowardliness of scheming to escape consequences that were his due. Only he felt that the time for confession had not come yet. For that reason, Michio's name did not come to his lips. Finally, his father said, "Then do as you please." His look was bitter. Daisuke did not find it pleasant either. Still, having no alternative, he bowed and prepared to retire. Then, his father stopped and said, "For my part, I don't intend to look after you anymore." When he returned to the living room, Umeko asked expectantly, "What happened?" Daisuke did not know how to answer her. That was chapter 15. Very straightforward, isn't it? We are nearing the end. 2 more chapters to go. Very straightforward chapter. Definitely. Forgot to mute my phone. Don't want it to ring suddenly. Alright, let's continue. Alright. Alright, guys. We are currently reading Natsume Sōseki, それから Chapter 16. Chapter 16. The next morning, even after he awoke, his father's last words rang in Daisuke's ears. Given the circumstances in which they had been uttered, he was forced to attach greater weight to their meaning than might normally have been the case. At least, as far as he was concerned, he would have to resign himself to the fact that material assistance from his father would no longer be forthcoming. In order to return to his father's good graces, even if he rejected the current match, he could not reject all prospective matches. Even if he rejected all prospective matches, he would have to give reasons sufficient to convince his father. For Daisuke, neither alternative was available. Still more impossible was deceiving his father on a matter that touched upon the roots of his personal philosophy of life. When he looked back at the previous day's interview, Daisuke could only think that things had proceeded as they had been intended. Yet he was fearful. Daisuke felt that he was furthering a destiny natural to himself. In the process, with the weight of this destiny upon his back, he had been pushed to the edge of a precipice. Daisuke thought that, as a first step, he should seek an occupation. But in his mind there was only the word occupation, and it failed to appear in his fleshy reality. Since he had never been before interested in any occupation, regardless of what he tried to imagine, his mind would only slide over its surface and refuse to break in to consider the internal reality. Society appeared to him like a flat surface partitioned according to a complex color scheme. And he could only think that he himself had no color whatsoever. After he had surveyed the entire realm of occupations, his eye came to the vagabond and rested. He clearly perceived his own shadow in the crowd of beggars that roamed between man and beast. What pained him the most about an existence of degradation was that it destroyed freedom of the spirit. When his body was besmirched with every kind of filth, how far his heart and mind would sink! Daisuke shuddered. He would have to drag Michio to the depth of this degradation. Michio was no longer Hiraoka's possession in spirit. Daisuke intended to shoulder his death with the responsibility for this woman. Even so, it now seemed to him that between the falseness of a man of stature and the kindness of a man that in the dregs of ruin, there was ultimately this little difference. To say that he would shoulder the responsibility for Michio until he died meant only that he had such an intention, and it could never equal the fact of shouldering the responsibility. Like a man who had been struck by blindness, Daisuke fell into a vacant stupor. He visited Michio again. She was quiet and composed, just as she had been the other day. The spring wind brushed her brows generously. Daisuke understood that he trusted him with her entire being. When he saw proof of this with his own eyes, he was overcome with uncontainable feeling of tender love and pity, and he berated himself for being such a scoundrel. He failed to say any things that he had intended. As he was leaving, he said, "Won't you arrange to come to my house again?" Michio nodded yes and smiled. Daisuke felt a pang. Since the other day, unpleasant though it was, Daisuke had been obliged to choose times for his visits when Hiraoka would be absent. At first he had not thought much about it, but lately it had become more than disagreeable. It was becoming daily more difficult for him to go. Besides, if he appeared too often in Hiraoka's absence, there was risk of arousing the maid's suspicion. Even now, whether or not it was just his fancy, he could not help feeling that she regarded him with distrustful eye when she served the tea. But Michio was completely unconcerned. At least on the surface, she seemed to think nothing of it. Of her relationship with Hiraoka, there was of course no opportunity to inquire in detail. On the rare occasions when he phrased a question or two indirectly, Michio would not respond. Her natural inclination whenever she saw Daisuke seemed to be drowned in the happiness of the moment. However, she felt privately, once, before Daisuke, she showed not a shadow of the fear that dark clouds surrounding them might descend at any moment. Michio was by nature a nervous woman. When he discovered that her recent behavior exceeded her normal performance, Daisuke was forced to interpret it not so much as evidence that her situation was not yet critical, but as indication that his own responsibility was that much weightier. In the 2 days prior to Michio's visit, Daisuke's mind failed to break any new grounds. The letters spelling occupation were burned squarely into his mind. If he shoved them away, the reality that he was without material support took their place and danced furiously. When that vanished, the vision of Michio's future appeared as a raging storm. The whirlwind of anxiety blew into Daisuke's head. These three concerns, like the points of a pinwheel, spun without a moment's pause. As a result, everything in his surrounding began to spin. He was like a person on board a ship. In the midst of spinning head and a spinning world, he continued to remain calm. There was no words from the house in Aoyama. Daisuke, of course, did not expect to hear anything. He made an effort to absorb himself in small talks with Kadono. Kadono, Kadono, being the sort of idle creature with so little to do that he hardly knew what to do with himself in the heat, proudly chatted on just as Daisuke wished. Whenever he tired of talking, he would propose, "Sensei, how about a game of shogi?" Towards the evening, they would water the garden. They walked barefoot, each with a pail in hand, carelessly splashing water everywhere. Kadono said that he would prove that he could hit the top of the paulownia tree next door. Just as he flung his pail, he slipped and fell on his seat. The 4 o'clocks next to the fence began to blossom. The leaves of the begonia growing beneath the water basin grew strikingly large. The rainy season cleared at last, and the daytime brought a whirl of cloud peaks. It was the time of the year when the powerful sun burned until the sky was transparent, gathering all the heat of the atmosphere to direct upon the earth. When the night came, all Daisuke did was to gaze at the stars above his head. The mornings he spent in the studies. There were 2 or 3 days when the cry of cicadas sounded steadily from the morning on. He often went to the bathroom to cool his head. Then Kadono, thinking it was about time, would come in and say, "It is unusually hot today, isn't it?" Daisuke passed about 2 days in this state of oblivion. On the third day, toward noon, he gazed from his study at the color of the glittering sky. When he smelt the flaming breath emitted from above, he was frightened. He thought his mind would be permanently affected by the fierce weather. Michio braved the heat to keep the promise that she had previously made. When he caught the sound of a woman's voice, Daisuke himself flew out to the entranceway. Michio stood outside grating, her parasol closed and a bundle in her arms. She apparently had come out of her ordinary clothes. She was just taking a handkerchief from the sleeve of a modest white cotton summer kimono. At first sight of her, Daisuke felt as if the fate had cut out Michio's future and thrust it cruelly before his eyes. But he smiled in spite of himself and said, "You look like you're going to elope." Michio answered calmly, "But if I didn't stop by on a shopping trip, I wouldn't come in comfortably." With these earnest words, she followed Daisuke in. Daisuke immediately offered her a fan. Exposure to the sun had brought a pleasant glow to Michio's cheeks. The usual tired look was nowhere to be seen. Even in her eyes was a youthful luster hovered. Daisuke allowed his senses to be drowned in the vitality of her beauty, and for a while forgot all else. But presently, when he thought that it was he who was invisibly chipping away at this beauty, who would finally cause its collapse, he became sad. After all, even today, he had called her to cloud over yet another part of this beauty. Daisuke hesitated several times before he could unburden his heart. For Daisuke, simply to ruffle this happy young woman's brow with anxiety constituted the greatest immorality. If not for the fact that a powerful sense of duty towards Michio was operating in his heart, he probably would not have revealed to her the circumstances that awaited them in the future, but instead would have repeated in the same room his confession of the other day and abandoned everything to the simple bliss of love. At last, Daisuke made up his mind. There hasn't been any particular change in your relationship with Hiroka? Even when faced with this question, Michio continued to be happy. Even if there were, it wouldn't matter. You trust me that much? I couldn't go on like this if I didn't. Daisuke's eyes turned to the burning mirror in the distant sky and were dazzled. I don't think I deserve to have that much trust placed in me, he answered with an ironic smile, but the inside of his head was roasting like a kiln. The remark did not seem to weigh on Michio's mind, and she did not even ask why not. She simply said, "Oh," pretending to be surprised. I ought to confess to you, I am a much less reliable fellow than Hiroka. I don't want you to overrate me, so I'll tell you everything. With this preface, he proceeded to recount the details of his relationship with his father up to the present. Finally, he said, I don't know what my position will be from now on, but at the very least, I won't become an independent, self-sufficient individual for quite some time. I won't even be half-sufficient, so what will you do? So, I'm worried that I might not be able to fulfill my responsibilities to you as I would like. Responsibilities? What responsibilities? I can't understand if you don't speak more clearly. As a result of his habitual emphasis on material well-being, Daisuke knew only the hardships of poverty were hardly suited to winning a lover's satisfaction. Thus, he had concluded that wealth was one of his responsibilities towards Michio and had formulated no other clear conceptions. It's not moral responsibility, I mean material responsibility. I'm not interested in any such thing. Even if you say you aren't, it is sure to become crucial. Whatever new relationship we move on to in the future, material resources will be half of the answer to everything. Maybe so, but it's useless to worry about it at this point. You say so now, but when it comes right down to it, it's only obvious that it's going to worry us. Michio's colors changed slightly. From what you have just been telling me about your father, it should have been clear from the start that things would turn out like this. I think you yourself must have realized as much a long time ago. Daisuke could not answer. He held his head and mumbled as if to himself, Something's wrong with my head. Tears came to Michio's eyes. If this bothers you, don't worry about me. Make peace with your father and go back to your old relationship. Daisuke suddenly seized Michio's wrist and all, but shook it to emphasize his words. If I planned to do something like that, I wouldn't worry in the first place. It's just that I feel sorry for you. That's why I'm apologizing. Apologize? Michio cut him off with a trembling voice. How can I let you apologize when all this is happening to you because of me? She began to weep out loud. Daisuke, as if to soothe her, then said, Then you'll put up with it? It won't be putting up, it's what I expect. There'll be other things too in the future. I know. I don't care what happens. Since the other day, I... Since the other day, I've been prepared to die if worst comes to worst. Daisuke shuddered in horror. Don't you have any wishes about how we should go on from here? He asked. Wishes? No, I don't have any wishes. I'll do whatever you say. To wonder? I can face it. If you die, I'll die. Daisuke shuddered again. But the way we are now, I don't care if we go on like this. Hiraoka doesn't seem to have noticed anything. Maybe he has. But I've already made up my mind, so it's alright. I don't care if I get killed. You shouldn't talk so cheaply about dying and getting killed. But even if nothing happened, my health isn't so good, so I can live a long life. Paralyzed with fear, Daisuke stiffened and stared at Michio. Michio gave herself up to a weeping, as if seized by an outburst of hysteria. In a short while, the outburst began to subside. Then she became once more the quiet, graceful, deep, beautiful woman she usually was. Her brow was especially clear. Daisuke asked, would it be alright if I saw Hiraoka and tried to settle the matter? Can you do that? Michio seemed surprised. I believe I can, answered Daisuke firmly. Then, however you see fit, said Michio. Then let's do it that way. It doesn't seem right for the two of us to do anything while deceiving Hiraoka. Of course, I intend to talk to him so that he will understand the facts well. And where I'm wrong, I'm prepared to apologize. It may not turn out as I want, but no matter how badly it goes, I intend to work it so nothing outrageous can come out of it. If we leave things half done like this, it's painful for us, and it is not right for Hiraoka either. It's just that if I go ahead and do this, then you won't be able to stand up to Hiraoka. I can't help thinking about that. That's where I feel sorry for you. Though, as far as that goes, I'm in disgrace too. It is, if it's proper to bear moral responsibility for one's deeds, no matter how humiliating it is, then I ought to tell Hiraoka about what has happened between us, even if it yields no other benefits. Besides, in this situation, it's a confession we have to make in order to resolve things for the future, so I think it's all the more necessary. I understand. Anyway, if it goes badly, I am prepared to die. Die. Alright. Even supposing death is the solution, how much time is there? Besides, if there were any danger of that, why would I take the initiative to tell Hiraoka? Michio began to weep again. Daisuke waited for the sun to decline to send Michio back, but he did not see her off as he had last time. He passed about 1 hour in his study, listening to the cicadas. He felt relief having seen Michio and cleared his chest about the future. He picked up his brush to write Hiraoka for a suitable time for a meeting, but he was suddenly overcome with the enormity of his responsibility and lost the courage to continue beyond salutations. Then he abruptly stripped to his shirt and dashed out barefoot into the garden. Kadono, who had been lost to the world in deep sleep while Michio was there, now appeared on the veranda, holding his shaven head between his hands. It's too early, isn't it? The sun's still out. Without bothering to answer, Daisuke burrowed into a corner of the garden, swept out the fallen bamboo leaves. Kadono reluctantly took off his clothes and joined him. Although it was a cramped garden, the dryness of the soil made it quite a task to moisten adequately. Halfway through, Daisuke said his arms hurt and wiped his feet and went inside. He sat down on the veranda with a cigarette. Seeing this, Kadono teased from below. Sensei, is your heartbeat a little irregular or something? That evening, he took Kadono to a fair in Kagurazaka and brought home 2 or 3 pots of autumn grasses that he arranged beneath the eaves where they would catch the dew. The night was deep and the sky distant. The color of the stars shone dark and dense. That night, Daisuke went to bed, having deliberately omitted drawing the shutters. It never crossed his mind that it would be unsafe. He put out the lamp and lay by himself inside the mosquito netting, peering from the dark into the sky inside his head, the events of the day flashed vividly. In another 2 or 3 days, the final outcome would be clear, he thought, and his heart leaped for joy. Then, before he knew it, he was drawn into a big sky and bigger dreams. The next morning, he made up his mind and wrote to Hiraoka. He said that he wanted to meet him privately about something and wished to know when would be most convenient for him. He himself would be free at any time. This was all he wrote, but he still placed the message in an envelope. When he had moistened the gum and affixed the red stamp, he felt as if he had given official recognition to crisis. He called Kadono and had him toss the fateful letter into the mailbox. When he handed the letter over, his hand had trembled slightly. But once that had been done, he had become blank and fell into a stupor. When he recalled that 3 years ago he had stood between Michio and Hiraoka and worked towards their marriage, it all seemed like a dream. He spent the next day in anticipation of Hiraoka's reply. The following day as well he stayed at home, counting on its arrival. 3-4 days went by. Still, there was no letter from Hiraoka. Then the day came when he normally would have gone to Aoyama to get his money. Daisuke's purse had become exceedingly light. Since that day, when he saw his father, Daisuke had resigned himself to the likelihood that he would no longer receive assistance from home. He could not think at this point of casually dropping in as if nothing had happened. Why, he could get along for 2-3 months just selling his books and clothes, he told himself, making light of it. He also thought in a commonsensical vein that once things settled down he could take his time and look for a job. Daisuke had already begun to believe, prior to any actual experience, the words that people like to repeat almost as a proverb, that it was quite difficult to starve to death. One always managed to somehow. On the 5th day, he braved the heat and took a streetcar to Hiraoka's office, where he found that Hiraoka had been absent from work for 2 or 3 days. Daisuke went outside and as he looked up at the dirty windows of the editorial office, he thought that he should have telephoned before venturing out. It was even questionable whether Hiraoka had received the letter. Daisuke had deliberately addressed it to the newspaper office. On his way home, he stopped at a second-hand bookstore in Kanda that he frequented and asked them to come and look over some books he no longer needed and wished to sell. That night, he did not even have the heart to water the garden. He stared absently at Kadono's form, clad in a white net shirt. "Are you tired tonight, Sensei?" asked Kadono, changing his pale. Daisuke, his heart weighted with anxiety, could not answer coherently. At dinner, his food had virtually no taste for him. He pushed it past his throat as if he were drinking, then threw down his chopsticks. He called Kadono and said, "Would you go over to Hiraoka's and find out whether he received my letter from a few days ago, and if he has, ask if you might have an answer and wait for it." Still worried that Kadono had not really understood, he further explained that he had sent a letter saying such and such, addressing to the newspaper office the other day. After he had sent Kadono on his way, Daisuke went out to the veranda and settled in a chair. When Kadono came back, he had blown out the lamp and was sitting still in the dark. "I had been to the Hiraoka's," called Kadono in the dark. "Mr. Hiraoka was at home. He said that he has seen your letter. He said he would come over tomorrow morning." "Oh? Thank you," Daisuke answered. "He said that he had meant to come sooner, but there was a sickness in the family, so he was delayed. He sent his regard." "Sickness?" repeated Daisuke involuntarily. "Yes, it seems that his wife isn't well." Kadono's cotton summer kimono with its white background was the only thing that loomed dimly in Daisuke's field of vision. The light left to the night was much too faint to illuminate their faces. Daisuke grasped the arms of his cane chair with both hands. "Is she very unwell?" he asked sharply. Well, I really couldn't say, but it didn't sound like it was on the light side. But if Mr. Hiraoka can come over tomorrow, it can't be that serious. Daisuke was somewhat reassured. What is it? What's wrong with her? Oh, I forgot to ask. Here their exchange came to an end. Kadono retraced his steps along the dark veranda and went into his room. As he sat listening quietly, Daisuke soon heard the sound of a lampshade knocking against the chimney. Kadono must have lit a light. Daisuke remained motionless in the night. Even as he was still, his heart trembled. The arms of his chair gleamed with perspiration. Daisuke clasped his hands and called for Kadono. The dim white of Kadono's kimono appeared once more at the end of the veranda. Oh, you're still sitting in the dark. Shall I light the lamp? Daisuke declined and asked again about Michio's illness. He asked every question that he could think of, whether they had engaged a nurse, how Hiraoka was taking it, even whether Hiraoka had taken the time off from work on account of his wife's illness. But after all, Kadono could only repeat what he had already said, and anything he added were mere conjecture. Even so, questioning him was more tolerable for Daisuke than sitting silently by himself. Before he went to bed, Kadono brought a letter from the night mailbox. Daisuke took it from him in the dark and made no attempt to look at it. Kadono, almost as if to prompt him, said, "It looks like it's from your home. Shall I bring a lamp?" Daisuke finally consented to having a lamp brought into his study, and by its light opened the envelope. The letter was addressed to him by Umeko, and it was quite long. I am sure you have been quite annoyed over this matter concerning a wife for you. For our part, your father and brother and I have also been very worried, but all of our efforts notwithstanding, you refused father outright the last time you were here. It was terribly disappointing, but now I have resigned myself. I found out that father had gotten angry with you and told you he would not be bothered about you anymore, and that you were to be prepared accordingly. I wonder if that's why you have not come since. I thought that perhaps on the day of your allowance, but you still did not come, and I am worried. Father says to leave you alone. Your brother is as easygoing as ever. He says that you will come over once you are hard up, that we can make you apologize properly to father then. If it doesn't look as though you are going to come, he says he'll go over and talk to you. But as far as the match goes, all three of us have given up. So I don't think there's a reason why you should be troubled further on that score. Although, father does seem to be angry still. As I see it, it is going to be difficult to return to your old relationship for some time to come. And maybe, given the circumstances, it is best that you stay away. But I am still worried about the money we give you every month. Knowing you, I think it would not be immediately occur to you to provide for yourself, and I can see only too clearly the difficulties you will be faced right away. It makes me feel terribly sorry for you. I am arranging to send you the usual sum. So when you receive it, try to make it last until next month. Someday, father will be in better humor. I will have your brother put in a word for you. If there is a chance, I will apologize for you too. Until then, it would be best for you to keep your distance as you have been. Umeko had written much more, but being a woman, she had repeated herself a good deal. It's a bit sexist. Daisuke pulled out the enclosed check and reread the letter from beginning to end, then carefully rolled it back, thanked his sister-in-law wordlessly. The hand that had signed from Umeko was rather clumsy. The colloquial style of the body was as Daisuke had recommended to her in the past. Daisuke gazed intently at the envelope in front of the lamp. His old life had been extended for another month. His sister-in-law's kindness was certainly welcome, but for Daisuke, who sooner or later had to make fresh starts, it was nevertheless poisonous. Still, since he did not intend to begin working for a livelihood until things were settled with Hiraoka, his sister-in-law's timely gift came as precious sustenance to him. That night, too, he blew out the lamp before going under the mosquito netting. Kadono had come to draw the outer doors, and he had let him go about it without objecting. Since they were glass, he could still see the sky. It was darker than the night before. Wondering if it had clouded over, he even got up and went to the veranda to look up through the glass towards the eaves. A shiny streak flowed diagonally across the sky. Daisuke lifted the netting again and went in. He could not fall asleep and flapped his fan back and forth. The situation with his own family did not weigh too heavily on him. As for jobs, he braced himself to accept whatever happened. It was Michio's illness, its cause, its outcome, that sorely troubled his mind. He also tried to imagine the various forms of his meeting with Hiraoka might take, that agitated his brain more than little. The message was that Hiraoka would come the next morning was 9 o'clock before it became too hot. Needless to say, Daisuke was not the sort to prepare conventional remark with which he might open his conversation. What had to be said was clear from the beginning, that the order in which these things were said would depend on the circumstances. That part, therefore, did not bother him, but he was concerned about making himself understood in the most peaceful manner as possible. That was why he had shunned excessive excitement and hoped fervently for a night of repose. He shut his eyelids with the desire for a sound sleep fixed firmly in his mind. But as luck would have it, his head was clear, and he found it even more difficult to fall asleep than the previous night. The summer night began to lighten faintly. Unable to withstand it any longer, Daisuke sprang up. Barefoot, he leaped into the garden and passionately trod on dew. Then he went back to the cane chair on the veranda, where he dozed off while waiting for sunrise. When Kadono came to open the doors, rubbing his sleepy eyes, Daisuke came to with a start. Half the earth's surface was already bathed in red sunlight. "Why, sensei, you sure are early," said a startled Kadono. Daisuke went straight into the bathroom and splashed water on himself. He would not eat any breakfast but had a cup of tea. He looked at the newspaper but barely understood what was written. As he read, the words he had just read swarmed and faded away. Only the hands of the clocks concerned him. There was still over 2 hours before Hiraoka would arrive. Daisuke wondered how he should pass the time until then. He could not stay still, but whatever he tried failed to absorb him. He wished that he could at least sleep through 2 hours and wake up to find Hiraoka before him. In the end, he tried to think of a task for himself. By chance, his eye fell on the envelope from Umeko lying on his desk. That was it, he thought, and forced himself to sit at the desk and compose a letter of thanks to his sister-in-law. He intended to write it with as much care as possible, but when he had put it in the envelope and addressed it, he looked at the clock and found out that only 15 minutes had gone by. Still seated, Daisuke turned uneasy to the sky. He seemed to be mentally searching for something. Suddenly he got up. "If Hiraoka comes, tell him that I'll be right back away and have him wait. I'll be back right away and have him wait," he told Kadono and went out. The sun hit him in the full face with a force that all but toppled him. Daisuke blinked and squinted constantly as he walked. From Ushigome Mizuke, he passed through the Idamachi and came out below Kudanzaka, where he went to the second-hand store he had visited the day before and said, "Yesterday, I asked you to come over for some books I didn't want anymore, but I have decided to put it off for a while, so..." On the way back, it was so hot that he took a streetcar to Idabashi and went out towards Bishamonmai across the wharf. The rickshaw was parked in front of his house. A pair of shoes was neatly arranged in the entranceway. Daisuke knew without being told by Kadono that Hiraoka had come. He wiped the sweat, changed to a freshly washed cotton kimono, and went out to the living room. "Oh, you've been on an errand," said Hiraoka. He was wearing a suit again and waved his fan as if he were being steamed. Thanks for coming in the heat. Daisuke was also forced to turn to the formal phrases. For a few minutes, the two talked about the weather. Daisuke wanted to ask about Michio right away, but for some reason it was difficult for him to come out with it. Eventually, the usual exchanges came to an end. The burden now fell on him who had arranged the meeting. I hear that Michio-san is ill. Yes, I had to take 2-3 days off from work on the account of it. I completely forgot about answering your letter too. That doesn't matter at all, but is Michio-san's condition that serious? Hiraoka could not give a clear yes or no answer. He explained briefly that while there seemed to be no immediate danger, it was definitely not a light case. The morning after the hot day, when she stopped to visit Daisuke on her shopping trip to Kagurazaka, Michio was helping her husband get ready for work when she suddenly fainted, still holding his tie in her hands. Hiraoka was startled and had put aside his own things to tend to her recovery. 10 minutes later, Michio said that she was all right and asked him to go to work. There was even the shadow of a smile on her lips. She was still lying down, but there seemed to be no particular reason to worry. So he had gone to work, leaving instructions to send for a doctor if she felt unwell, or to call him at the office if necessary. That night, he came home late. Michio had already gone to bed, saying that she felt unwell. When he asked her how she was, she could not give a clear answer. The next morning when he got up, her color was very poor. Hiraoka was quite surprised, had to call the doctor. The doctor had examined Michio's heart and knit his brows. The fainting, he had said, was from anemia. He warned that she was suffering from acute nervous exhaustion. After that, Hiraoka had taken off from work. Michio herself insisted that she was all right and almost begged him to go to work, but he had not listened. His second night of nursing her, Michio had wept and said that there's something she had to apologize to him for, and told him to go to Daisuke for explanation. The first time he heard this, Hiraoka had not believed her words, thinking that her heart was giving her trouble. He had said yes, just to put her mind at rest. On the third day, the same request was repeated. It was then that Hiraoka had recognized some sort of significance to Michio's words. Then, the same evening, Kadonoha came all the way to Koishikawa to get his answer for Daisuke's letter. Is there some connection between what you called me over for and what Michio was talking about? Hiraoka looked wonderingly at Daisuke's face. Hiraoka's words had affected Daisuke deeply, but when he was suddenly confronted with this unforeseen question, he was stopped for an answer. With its unexpectedness and its innocence, Hiraoka's question hit home sharply. Daisuke blushed slightly, an unusual thing for him, and looked down. But when he raised his head again, he had recovered his usual quiet manner, in which there was not a trace of fear. There's probably a good deal of connection between what Michio-san wants to apologize to you for and what I want to talk to you about. They might even be one and the same thing. I must tell you about it at any cost. I'm going to tell you because I have the duty to tell you, so for the sake of our friendship in the past, I hope you will consent to letting me fulfill my duty. What is it? You're being so formal. Hiraoka's brow acquired an air of seriousness for the first time. Well, I would prefer to do without these preliminaries, which make it seem as if I'm making excuses, and talk to you candidly instead. But considering the rather serious nature of the matter, and in fact that it involves social taboos, it would be extremely distressing if you became agitated halfway through. I really would like to have you hear me out to the end. Well, what is it? This thing that you have to tell me about. In addition to reflecting intense curiosity, Hiraoka's face was becoming increasingly serious. But in return, when I have said everything I have to say, I'll listen quietly to whatever you might have to say about me. Hiraoka did not say anything. From behind his glasses, he fixed wide eyes upon Daisuke. Outside, the sun glared piercingly and even penetrated the veranda, but the two had all but dismissed the heat from their awareness. Daisuke lowered his voice one pitch. He began to recount in detail the changes his relationship with Michio had undergone since the couple's return from Kyoto. Hiraoka listened with his lips tightly shut to Daisuke's every word and every syllable. Daisuke took little over an hour to tell everything. During the time, Hiraoka interrupted him approximately 4 times to ask exceedingly simple questions. And this is roughly the course of it, Daisuke concluded. Hiraoka's response was a sigh so deep it sounded like a moan. Daisuke was enormously pained. From your position, it must seem that I betrayed you. You must think of me an unpardonable friend. There is nothing I can say to that. There's no way I can apologize for what has happened. Then you think that what you did was wrong? Of course. So you kept on, knowing that it was wrong, Hiraoka emphasized. His tone had become rather more urgent than before. That is right. That's why I'm ready to accept manfully any punishment you might want to mete out to us. I just gave you the facts as they are to furnish you with the material of your sentence. Hiraoka did not answer. Then he drew his face close to Daisuke and said, Do you mean to say that you think there is some way in this world of restoring my honor when it has been so disgraced? This time it was Daisuke who did not answer. The sanctions of law and of society are of no use to me, continued Hiraoka. So, you are asking if there's a way to restore your honor just with the parties concerned. That's right. If I could make Michio-san undergo a complete change of heart, if I made her love you more than twice as before, and moreover, if I made her hate me like a monster, then that would be some measure of penance. Are you capable of doing that? No, said Daisuke firmly. Then in effect, you have pushed ahead to this day with something you considered to be wrong. And now, still considering it to be wrong, you intend to push it through the end. Isn't that it? It may seem like a contradiction, but it's a contradiction that comes from a situation in which a husband and wife relationship established as an institution of society happens not to coincide with the husband-wife relationship that has emerged as a fact of nature, so there's nothing to be done about it. I apologize to you as Michio-san's husband according to the social institution, but as far as my act itself is concerned, I don't feel guilty of a contradiction or of anything else. Then, Hiraoka raised his voice slightly, then you are of the view that my wife and I can't establish a husband-wife relationship that would satisfy the requirement of a social institution, is that right? Daisuke turned sympathetic, pitying eyes upon Hiraoka. Hiraoka's rugged brow softened lightly. Hiraoka, as far as society is concerned, this is a big scandal that touches upon a man's honor. In order to uphold your rights, even if you don't intentionally try to uphold them, it is only natural that the instinct should be there, and it cannot be helped that you should become agitated. But anyway, won't you try to go back to the self where you were during our school days before all this happened and listen to what I have to say once more? Hiraoka said nothing. Daisuke also held back for a moment. He took one puff on his cigarette. Then, without hesitation, said quietly, You don't love Michio-san. Well, that may be none of my business, but I have to say it, because I think that's probably the answer to all questions behind this problem. Then you don't have any responsibility? I love Michio-san. Do you have the right to love another man's wife? It cannot be helped. Legally, Michio-san's heart belongs to you, but she's a human being, not a thing. So no one can own her heart. No one, no matter who, can give orders about the direction or quantity of love. The rights of a husband don't go that far. In fact, it's a husband's duty to keep his wife's love from straying, isn't it? Alright? Even supposing it's true that I didn't love Michio as you might have hoped. Hiraoka seemed to be struggling to contain himself. Daisuke waited for his words to come to an end. You remember about 3 years ago, don't you? Hiraoka had changed his approach again. 3 years ago, you and Michio-san got married. That's right. Do you still remember that time? Daisuke's mind suddenly flew back. Over the space of those 3 years, the memory of those days shone like a torch whirling in the darkness. It was you who said you will work on my behalf to get Michio. It was you who confided to me that you wanted to marry her. Of course, I haven't forgotten that. I am grateful for your kindness to this day. With these words, Hiraoka was lost in thought for a minute. We went through Ueno at night and we were going down to Yanaka. It had just rained. The road was bad under Yanaka. We had started talking in front of the museum and we got to the bridge. You wept for me. Daisuke was silent. I have never been so thankful for a friend as I was then. I was so happy that I couldn't sleep at all that night. It was a night when the moon was out, so I stayed up until it disappeared. I was happy that night too, said Daisuke, as if in a dream. But Hiraoka broke him off sharply. Why did you weep for me then? Why did you swear that you would help me get Michio? If you were going to do something like this, why didn't you just say to me, "Oh, is that right?" and leave me alone? I don't remember ever having done anything so horrible that would make you take revenge on me like this. Hiraoka's voice trembled. Beads of perspiration gathered on Daisuke's pale forehead. Then he said imploringly, Hiraoka, I loved Michio-san before you did. Hiraoka looked blankly on Daisuke's suffering. I was not the person then that I am now. When I heard your story, I thought that even if it meant sacrificing my own future, it was my duty as a friend to try to help you fulfill your wishes. That's where I was wrong. If only my mind had been as ripe as it is right now, there might have been another solution. But unfortunately, I was young, and so I was much too scornful of nature. Thinking back to that time, I have been overwhelmed with regret. Not just for myself, I'm regretful for you too. What I apologize to you for from the bottom of my heart is not so much what's happened now, but for my thoughtless chivalry of 3 years ago. Please, Hiraoka, forgive me. As you can see, nature has taken its revenge on me, and I bow my head before you in apology. Tears fell upon Daisuke's knees. Hiraoka's glasses clouded. It's fate. There's nothing we can do about it. Hiraoka let out a low moan. For a while, the two gazed into each other's face. If you had any thoughts on how to settle this, I'll hear them. I'm the one who's apologizing to you. I don't have the right to bring up anything like that. It's only proper that I listen to your thoughts first, said Hiraoka. I don't have any. Hiraoka clapped his head. Then let me speak. Won't you give me Michio-san? Daisuke's tone was determined. Hiraoka took his hands from his head and let his arms fall like two sticks upon the table. At the same time, he said, All right, I will. Then before Daisuke could respond, he repeated, I will. I'll give her to you, but I can't do it now. Maybe as you have guessed, I haven't loved Michio all that much, but I haven't hated her either. Michio is sick now, and it's not a light case. I don't want to hand over a bedridden person to you. If I can't give her to you until she's well, then until that time I am her husband, and as her husband, it's my responsibility to nurse her. I have apologized to you. Michio-san is apologizing to you too. As far as you're concerned, we must be the scandalous creatures. Maybe we can never justify ourselves no matter how much we apologize, but after all, she is sick in bed. I know that. You probably think that I'm going to take advantage of her being sick and be cruel to her out of spite, but really, even for me, that would be... Daisuke believed Hiraoka's words and thanked him inwardly. Next, Hiraoka said, "Given this situation, since I am Michio's husband in the eyes of society, I cannot associate with you anymore. I want you to understand that from this day I am breaking all ties with you." "I suppose that it cannot be helped," said Daisuke, hanging his head. "Michio's illness, as I've said, isn't light. There's no telling what could happen. I know you must be worried too, but once we have broken ties with each other, there's no choice. Whether I am there or not, I want you to refrain from entering my house." "I understand," said Daisuke falteringly. His cheeks grew increasingly pale. Hiraoka rose. "Please just stay another 5 minutes," pleaded Daisuke. Hiraoka sat down and remained wordless. "Is there any chance of sudden danger with Michio-san's illness?" "Well, won't you tell me that much?" "Well, you probably don't have to worry that much." Hiraoka's answer was pronounced in dark tone. It seemed as if he was cursing the earth. If by any chance it looks like the worst could happen, then would you let me see her just once? I promise I won't ask anything else, just that. Please agree to just that much." Hiraoka's lips were closed. He could not readily give an answer. Daisuke, with no outlet for his anguish, rubbed his palms together until the grime appeared. "Well, that depends on the circumstances at the time," answered Hiraoka heavily. "Then from time to time, may I send to find out how she is?" "No, that won't do. You and I don't have ties anymore. If there's to be any exchange with you in the future, that will only be when I hand Michio over to you." Daisuke jumped from his chair as if an electric current had shot through him. "Oh, I know! You're planning to just show me Michio-san's dead body! That's terrible! That's cruel!" Daisuke went around the edge of the table and came up to Hiraoka. With his right hand, he grabbed Hiraoka's suit collar and shook him back and forth, saying, "That's terrible! That's terrible!" Hiraoka saw in Daisuke's crazed eyes the frightening light. He stood up with Daisuke still shaking his shoulders. "Nothing of the sort will happen," he said, and held Daisuke's hand. The two looked at each other with the faces that were possessed. "You've got to calm down," said Hiraoka. "I am calm," answered Daisuke. The words escaped painfully from between his gaps. Presently, the reaction to the outburst set in. Like a man who had exhausted the power to support himself, Daisuke sank to his chair. He covered his face with both hands. What in the soap opera was that? Whee! That was chapter 16. You got one chapter to go. Will he get Michio-san or not? We shall see. Wow. Alright, it's only a few pages to go. Oh my god, guys, we are finishing the book! Exciting! Took me a while, but, you know, it's worth it. Alright. Guys, one sip of tea. Let's go. We are currently reading the last chapter of それから by Natsume Sōseki. Chapter 17. 17. Chapter 17. Let's go. Chapter 17. それから by Natsume Sōseki. That night, past 10 o'clock, Daisuke crept out of the house to a surprised Cardinal who asked, Where would you be going at this hour, Sensei? He had answered vaguely. Oh, nowhere. And then had gone to Teramachi. Now that it was hot, the night had only begun. A stream of people in cotton kimonos passed alongside Daisuke. To him, they appeared only as moving objects. The shops on either side were brightly lit. Daisuke's eyes were dazzled, and he turned off to a side street with fewer lights. When he came out to the edge of Edogawa River, a dark wind was blowing just perceptibly, fainting, stirring the black leaves of the cherry trees. Two figures stood on the bridge, looking down over the railing. He did not run into anyone from Kongojizaka either. The Iwasaki's high stone wall sealed the narrow hilly road on either side. The section where Hiraoka lived was even more quiet. No light glimmered from most of the houses. The wheels of an empty rickshaw coming from the distance rattled and startled the heart. Daisuke went as far as Hiraoka's wall and stopped. He drew himself close and tried to look in. Everything was dark. Above the barred gate, a dim lantern to look in. Above the barred gate, a dim lantern lit the nameplate unsuccessfully. A gecko cast its shadow diagonally on the lantern glass. Daisuke came here again in the morning. At noon, too, he roamed on the streets of the neighborhood. He thought of catching the maid on her way shopping and asking her about Michio's condition, but the maid never came out. There was no sign of Hiraoka either. Even when he pressed himself to the wall and strained his ears, he could hear no voices. He thought of confronting the doctor and pressing him for details of Michio's condition, but nothing that looked like a doctor's rickshaw stopped before Hiraoka's gate. After a while, his head, roasted by the powerful sun, began to move like the sea. If he stood still, he felt that he would topple over. If he walked, the earth swayed in enormous waves. Daisuke endured his agony and made his way home, almost crawling. Without eating his dinner, he lay where he had fallen and did not stir. When the terrible sun sank at last and the night slowly deepened the color of the stars, in the darkness and coolness, Daisuke came to life at last, and letting the dew moisten his head, he went out once again to the place where Michio lay. Daisuke went back and forth 2 or 3 times in front of Michio's gate. Every time he had gotten the lantern, he stopped and strained his ears. He would stand there for 5 or 10 minutes, but he could tell nothing of what was going on inside the house. All was still. Each time Daisuke came to the lantern, the gecko was still there, with its body glued flat upon the glass. Its black shadow still slanted, never moved. Each time Daisuke noticed the gecko, he had an unpleasant sensation. Its moving form was peculiarly disturbing. His mind fell into the superstitiousness that came from the hyper-acuity of the spirit. He imagined that Michio was in danger. He imagined that Michio was in agony at that very instant. He imagined that Michio, out of longing to see him once more, lingered on, unable to die, stealing every breath. Daisuke came to the point where he could no longer restrain himself from hardening his fists and pounding on Hiraoka's gates, as if to shatter them. Immediately he realized that he had not the right to do so, to so much as lay a finger on what belonged to Hiraoka. Stricken with fear, he began to run. On the quiet little street, only his footsteps echoed loudly. As he ran, Daisuke became even more fearful. When he finally slowed his steps, his breathing was extremely painful. At the side of the road were several stone steps. Daisuke sat down upon them half in daze. He covered his forehead with his hands and became immobile. After a while, he opened his eyes to find a large black gate. From above, the gate, towering pine trees extended their branches beyond the hedge. Daisuke had been resting at the gateway to a temple. He got up. He began walking again, stupefied. In a little while, he came once again to Hiraoka's little street. He stood before the lantern as if in a dream. The gecko still cast its shadow in the same spot. Daisuke let escape a deep sigh and finally descended Koishikawa to the south. That night, His head spun ceaselessly in the middle of a vortex as red and hot as fire. Daisuke fought desperately to escape from it, but his head would no longer obey his commands. Like a falling leaf, it spun round and round, unresisting in the wind of flames. The next day, the burning sun climbed high into the sky. Outside, everything began to reel in the violent light. Daisuke struggled to endure it and finally got up past 8 o'clock. No sooner was he up than his eyes were dizzy. He splashed himself with water as usual, then went into the study and cowered. Kadono came upon this scene and announced a visitor. No sooner he had spoken than he stopped and looked at Daisuke in amazement. It cost Daisuke an enormous effort just to answer. Without asking who it was, he turned his face halfway to Kadono, still supporting it in his hands. Just then, the visitor's footsteps sounded on the veranda, and without waiting to be announced, his brother Seigo came in. "Please, over there." It was all Daisuke could do to motion him to seat. As soon as he sat down, Seigo took out his fan and fanned so vigorously that it parted his fine linen collar. The heat must have been so uncomfortable for his bulky frame, as his breathing was heavy. "It's so hot," he said. "I hope that everything is all right at home." Daisuke's manner was that of an utterly exhausted person. For a while the two chatted as usual. Needless to say, Daisuke's tone and manner were not as they usually were, but his brother would not ask if anything was the matter. When the conversation came to a pause, Seigo reached in his kimono with the words, "Actually, today and brought out a letter. "Actually, I came because I wanted to ask you a few things," he said, and turning the back of the envelope towards Daisuke, he asked, "Do you know this fellow?" Hiraoka's name and address were written in his hand. "Yes, I do," Daisuke answered almost mechanically. "He says that he was a classmate of yours. Is that true?" "Yes." "You know this fellow's wife, too?" "Yes, I do." His brother picked up his pen and flapped it 2 or 3 times, then he leaned forward slightly and dropped his voice. "Is there some sort of connection between you and this fellow's wife?" From the start, Daisuke had no intention of concealing anything. But when the question was put so simply, he wondered how he could begin to reduce the complicated developments into a yes or no answer, and he could not open his mouth readily. His brother took the letter from the envelope. He rolled it back 4 or 5 inches and handed it over to Daisuke with the words, "The fact of the matter is, this person named Hiraoka sent this letter to father. Do you want to read it?" Daisuke took the letter silently and began reading. His brother sat still, gazing intently at Daisuke's forehead. The letter was written in such small hand. The letter was written in a small hand, and Daisuke read. As Daisuke read, one line after another dangled from his hand. Even when it had grown to nearly 2 feet, the letter showed no sign of coming to an end. Daisuke's eyes began to see spots. His eyes was leaden. He thought that even if he had to force himself, he should read on to the end. His whole body was under an indescribable pressure, and the sweat poured from his armpits. When he finally came to the end, he did not even have the heart to re-roll the letter. It lay sprawling across the table. "Is it true what he says there?" asked his brother in a low voice. "It's true," he answered. Like a man who had received a shock, his brother stopped his pen for an instant. For a while, neither of them could speak. Finally, his brother asked, "What on earth made you do such a stupid thing?" His voice was dumbfounded. Daisuke still would not open his mouth. You could have married any woman you pleased if you wanted," his brother continued. Daisuke was still silent. The third time, the brother said, "It's not as if you haven't had your share of dissipations up to now. If you're going to pull a blunder like this, what's the use of giving you all the money?" By this time, Daisuke lacked the courage to try to explain his position to his brother. Only a little while ago he had been of exactly the same opinion himself. "Your sister's been crying," said Seigo. "Has she?" Daisuke answered as if in dream. "Father's angry." Daisuke did not answer. He only gazed at his brother as if he were looking at some faraway place. "You have always been a fellow who didn't understand things, but I went along with it until today because I thought that someday there would come a time when you would understand. But this time, I have finally given up. You really are a fellow who doesn't understand anything at all. There's nothing more dangerous in the world than a person who doesn't understand. You can't feel safe about what he might do, what he's thinking. That might suited you perfectly well, but think about fathers or my position in society. Even you must have some notion of family honor." His brother's words grazed Daisuke's ear and spilled outside. Throughout his body, all he felt was pain, but he was not so shaken as to suffer pangs of conscience towards his brother. Needless to say, he had not the slightest inclination to go through the motions of putting a plausible face on things in order to gain the sympathy of this worldly brother. In his own mind, he was confident that he had taken the path that was right for him. He was content with that. Only Michio could understand discontentment. Beyond Michio, father, brother, sister-in-law, society, human beings were all his enemies. They would all surround the two with roaring flames and burn them to death. It was Daisuke's deepest desire to stand in the silent embrace with Michio and to be consumed as quickly as possible in this wind of flames. He made no reply to his brother. Supporting his heavy head, he sat as motionless as stone. "Daisuke," his brother called, "I came today on an errand from father. You haven't come home. You haven't come near the house since that day. Normally, father would have called you and questioned you himself, but today, he said he didn't want to see your face, so he sent me over to find out the truth. And if you had some explanation to make, I was to hear them. If not, if everything Hiraoka says is based on fact, then this is what father has to tell you. I will not see Daisuke for the rest of my life. He can go where he pleases, do what he pleases. In exchange, I will not treat him as a child of my own, and he is not to think of me as a father. That's only reasonable. And from what you say, there is not a single falsehood in Hiraoka's letter, so there's no choice. And on top of it, you don't seem to have any regrets. You don't seem penitent at all. So there's no way I can go home to try to plead with father. All I can do is to tell you exactly what father said and leave. Is that clear? Do you understand what father is saying?" "I understand very well," Daisuke answered simply. "You are a fool," his brother said loudly. Daisuke did not raise his head. "You are dunce," his brother said again. You are never at a loss for words, but now, when it counts, you act like as if you're dumb. And you pull tricks behind your father's back that will ruin his good name. What were you getting educated for all this time?" His brother took the letter from the table and began rolling it himself. The stationery rustled in the quiet room. Seigo put it back in the envelope and put it away in his kimono. "I'm going," he said, this time in his normal tone. Daisuke bowed politely. His brother said briefly, "I won't see you anymore either," and went to the entranceway. After his brother had left, Daisuke sat without moving for some time. When Kadono came to clear the tea service, Daisuke suddenly stood and said, "Mr. Kadono, I'm going out to look for a job." Then he immediately put on his cap and flew out into the heat of the day without even taking a parasol. Daisuke hurried in the heat, almost breaking into a run. The sun shone straight down upon his head. The dry dust covered his bare feet like powdered fire. He felt as if he was being scorched. As he walked, he repeated to himself, "I'm burning, I'm burning." When he came to Iidabashi, he got on a streetcar. The streetcar began to move straight ahead. Inside the car, Daisuke said, "Oh, it's moving. The world's moving," loudly enough to be heard by those around him. His head began to spin at the same speed as the train. The more it spun, the more flushed it became from the heat, as if he could ride this for half a day. He thought he could burn into ashes. Suddenly, a red mailbox caught his eye. The red color immediately leaped into Daisuke's head and began to spin around and around. An umbrella shop sign had 4 red umbrellas hanging on top of the other. The color of these umbrellas also leaped into Daisuke's head and whirled around. At an intersection, someone was selling bright red balloons. As the streetcar sharply turned the corner, the balloons followed and leaped into Daisuke's head. A red car carrying parcel post passed close by the streetcar in the opposite direction, and its color also sucked into Daisuke's head. The tobacco shop curtain was red. A banner announcing a sale was also red. The telephone pole was red. One after another, there were signs painted in red. Finally, the whole world turned red, and with Daisuke's head at the center, it began to spin around and around, breathing tongues of fire. Daisuke decided to go on riding until his head was completely burnt away. And that's the end of chapter 17, and thus the end of それから by Natsume Sōseki. Yeah, that's pretty Natsume Soseki's brand on point. Basically, no ending. Just, yeah, it's pretty. I enjoy it. We'll see, okay. It definitely feels a bit like, you know, the prequel to The Gate, but like I say, I'm going to do some research after this. There's actually an afterword in this book by Norma Moorfield. It sometimes the point feels that he doesn't really know how to end his books. I think not knowing how to end a book is always like something like a writer's curse kind of. But I don't know. I don't know if it's like this ending is like planned or not planned. Natsume Soseki's endings always feels like it's super unplanned. It's because it's like such an open ending. You know, you have to figure out yourself like, oh, okay, will Michio recover from a sickness? Well, when she recovers, then Hiraoka said that he will hand her over to him, and by that, does that like will they get to be together? If we want to say that The Gate is like the sequel to this, then yeah, they are together after that, but yeah. I don't know. Oh wow. It is a trilogy. There you go. It's Sanshiro, それから and the gate. That's why I feel like, ah, that's why I always feel like when I was reading the gate, it always feel like it's a continuation of a story, but I don't know what is the continuation of the story. Like, and then like after a while, it was revealed that they, they, they used to be friends, and she used to be married, and they're now together. And like it was towards the end, it was like kind of somewhat revealed, and I was like, when would like I didn't know about this, but now that yeah, it is a trilogy. God damn. Wait. It is said that uh it is in the first trilogy consisting of Sanshiro 1908, それから 1909, and Mon, the Gate, in 1910. We see the emergence of mature novelists. Yeah, before discussing Sanshiro. Yeah, and then I was like also like feeling like, oh, like the character in this feels a lot like the student character in the lead character in Sanshiro. So, Sanshiro was about a university student. Sanshiro was the simple man. Character. Yeah, does feel kind of connected for sure. It's not. I don't think it's like a like name to name type of like trilogy, but it's like kind of connected in some ways to another. Sanshiro, his timid and sophisticated, do not. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, definitely. There was a character, like his friend's character. There was also a character that is like the main character's friend's younger sister kind of situation. Yeah, it's not like a name to name sequel or prequel or whatever, but it's definitely feel somewhat connected for sure. Definitely felt interconnected somehow. Yeah. Well, now he has to work. Lamau XD, like all human beings. Hmm. Yeah, in the gate, it was husband and wife, but the wife used to be with someone else or was married to someone else. So it's like kind of like the sequel to it, but also not exactly. It's kind of like a lot of like, oh, the first one is Sanshiro, and then what Sanshiro is like when in his youth, when he's a university student, and then sore kara would be like, oh, what Sanshiro would be like if he is like Daisuke, and then keep saying and then sore kara, um, and then the gate mon is like, oh, um, this is what Daisuke and Michio will be like if became they get to become with each other, uh, get to be with each other as Oyone and uh, Sosuke. So it's like it's that the main characters are all like different names, but they have like certain characteristics that's like very very similar to each other to the point that it does feel like it's connected. Like, oh, is Daisuke Sanshiro? Is Sosuke Daisuke? Is Daisuke Sanshiro? Like it's so much. It does feel like there's some connection there for sure. Like, you know, yeah. So it's like rather than support the possibility that Daisuke and Michio take up a life together after his declaration of love, the gate graphically illustrates the implausibility of that idea. Daisuke could not have endured for 1 minute Sosuke and Oyone's existence. Yeah, it was not a good Sosuke and Vivid Dreams. Yep. Sosuke was definitely a much more resilient person than Daisuke for sure. There, it's like a more grown adult than Daisuke, but at the same time, like, will Daisuke become someone like Sosuke? So it's like really a question to ask. Like, it's like, yeah, there's possibility, but at the same time, Sosuke is a very resilient man. So I don't think Daisuke can do anything that Sosuke does, really. Sosuke is a very, 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 very hardworking man. But yeah, Sosuke also has like really, um, you know, cowardly attributes to him, just like Daisuke. It's interesting. Interesting. We finished the book. So I can probably like rearrange Sanshiro, like in my playlist, put Sanshiro first and then Sanshiro, それから and Mon. So that it would be the trilogy, basically. Yeah, I love it. I like it. Very interesting book, for sure. Very. There were some good quotes every now and then. Every now and then. Anyway, that's all for today. I'm so glad I finished reading finally this book, and I'll get back to you guys next time. Oh, I'll figure out what book to read next. Probably, I still have the minor. I think Soseki's book. I still have the minor, and then I still have the Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro. So Unconsoled is a fucking heavy book. So if I'm reading that one, I need to make sure that I have a set aside time to properly read it for sure. But yeah, nowadays I don't read more than 3 hours or so. Like I don't have the stamina anymore to read for so long. But yeah, anyways, thank you so much to whoever's listening to this. Thank you for stopping by. If you have listened to until here thus far, thank you for hanging out with me. If you are listening to this thus far in my YouTube, thank you so much for actually reading the book with me. And if you have not clicked on the subscribe button yet, it's time. Oh, I don't spam people because I don't post that much, but at least you will get to subscribe to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos of books, reading sessions, endless supply of someone reading book to you. hundreds of videos that you can click on to listen to whichever that interests you. Anyways, thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for listening to me read as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, everyone. Bye bye. I'll see you guys next time. Da, 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 da. Bye.